everyone, this is Carolyn, your retired again happy friend from Mississippi. So welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to start on the baby quilt, and this is going to be a finished size of 40 by 40 baby quilt. So if you watched my channel last week, the plans have changed just a little bit. So I'm going to be using this fabric, and this is the flower, this is the dot, and this is the solid. So on my video last week when I was showing you my pink one that I worked up as my sample to get all my measurements and my pattern down, you will see on the instructions, the squares are listed as flower, dot, and solid. And I'm going to do my backing out of the solid. So I'm getting ready to start cutting it, and I'll show you how I measure it and cut it. I have not washed my fabric yet. I got it, this fabric I got from Hobby Lobby, and I wanted something that would be good for a boy or a girl. So I found this. It has pink, blue, and yellow, and a little bit of light green. So I think that will be really good for either one. So this is going to be the solid square and the backing. So to start with, I have my cutting mat. It's an Omni Grid mat, and the dimensions on it is 18 by 24. Then I have my Omni Angle ruler, and this is a 6 by 24 ruler. Then I have my rotary cutter, and I'm going to do the top stitching in yellow. So I think that will be real pretty on the top of the quilt to have it top stitched in yellow. And then the other thing I have is my pack of batting. And I like cotton batting, so this is the Warm and Natural Needled Cotton Batting. And it came in a pack. This is the baby size, and the size of it is 45 by 60. So any of the extra fabric that we have left over, you can save it and put it in your fabric stash and use it to make quilted hearts at somewhere on down the road. Now, when I was buying my fabric, I did get enough extra to make the baby pillow. So my baby pillow is going to be of the solid on the yellow, and I had the dimensions on my last video on when I did the pink sample of what the baby pillow is. So I'm going to lay it out. I'll show you exactly how I cut it. And today we're going to cut the squares. I'll show you how I lay it out on my bed, and then how I start sewing it together. So that's what we'll do this week. Then the next week we'll put the 3 layers together and start the machine quilting. So this is going to be a fun project. And I'm so glad you're here to sew along and quilt along with me. So I have the flower fabric on the cutting mat, and we're going to need 8.5 inch squares. I'm going to start by getting my fabric even. So I'm going to put my cutting line. I have this folded edge straight along that line, and I have the cutting ruler straight on. I'm matching up my lines on the top and the bottom so I can get a straight cut. Okay, the top edge is straight now. Now I'm going to, rather than turning my fabric around to cut the selvage off, I'm going to turn my mat around. So I'm going to leave my fabric where it is. I have this straight, and now I'm going to straighten the selvage edge and cut the selvage off. So now I'm going to slide the edge of my fabric even along the line, the edge of the line, and put my ruler at 8.5 on that end, 8.5 on that end. So 8 8.5, and 8.5. Okay. And now this one, just slide it over to the edge. Finish cutting the selvage off on the edge. So now I'm going to line my ruler up at 8.5 on that side, 8.5 on this end. Okay, and this is my extra I got, so I'll have enough to make my baby quilt. So now I'm going to take this piece of fabric and line it up right on top of the first one. Line the edge up along the straight line. And now put the ruler on 8.5 and 8.5. So I'm lining the fabric up. It is straight along that edge, and now it's straight on this edge. So I have my ruler on 8.5 on both ends. So go with the old philosophy, measure twice, cut once. So there, 2, 4, 8.5, and now we'll go to 19. Line my ruler up. Now we want our cutting to be as precise as we can get it, because all of our seams on our quilt, sewing the squares together, is going to be a 1/4 inch seam. And if we have all of our measurements and our cutting precise, our squares will come together. So have 2, 4, and this is 4, so now we have 8. So on the yellow, on the solid, on the pattern, we need 8 squares of the solid, which in my case is going to be the yellow. So after you go to the store and pick out your fabric and get your fabric that you're going to work with, decide if you're going to do your pattern in different colors, just write out beside of it which fabric you're going to put where. So I'm going to go ahead and do the dot fabric, which we're going to need 9 squares on it. But when you cut out your solid, do it exactly the same way we just did the flower, and you'll get your 8 squares. Now I'm going to do the dot fabric the same way. Okay, I've got my edge straight. Now this time I am going to turn my fabric because I had to get it long ways to do my selvage. So now that I have my selvage off, I have that straight edge, which I'm going to put right along that straight line, put the fold along that straight line, and now go to the top and straighten up the top of the fabric. And I apologize for my throat today. The pollen is pretty bad, and my allergies are acting up today. So I love spring, but I really am always glad when the pollen part of it is over. Okay, there we go. Now we need 8.5 inches. I'm going to slide that up to this straight line. This is along that straight line, so now I can see exactly where 8.5 inches is. So this cutting mat and cutting ruler makes it easy. My fabric is doubled, so every time I cut, well, I'm glad I turned that over. I didn't quite get all that selvage off, so I'm going to have to go and do another trim on that selvage. There's still some print on it, so I'm going to do another cut. Take a little bit more off. Get my edges all lined up. Okay, now slide that on over to that straight line and flip my mat. Bring this edge up, this edge right along the edge of that line. This edge is on that line and that edge is straight. So now we're going to take the ruler and put it on 8.5 and 8.5. Okay. Now, I'm sure there is more than one way to do this, because most seamstresses and people who sew a lot, and especially people who make quilts a lot, have developed their own technique and their own way of doing everything. So that was 8.5, and now 8.5 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is going to be right on the 17 line. So I'm going to put the ruler on 17 and 17. And cut that. You can tell I have a new blade in my rotary color, because everything is slicing off perfectly with the first pass of my rotary cutter. So when I was at Hobby Lobby today, I did go ahead and pick me up a package of new blades, and it really helps. Okay, now I'm going to, and you don't have to do this, you can cut it one layer at a time if you want to. I'm just stacking my fabric up so I can go ahead and cut both layers at one time. And I'm going to put this edge even with the edge straight line. This edge is even on that line. And now we want it 8.5 inches. So 8.5 on that end, 8.5 on this end. Okay. Uh-oh, excuse me. Okay, 8.5, 8.5. Okay, now 8.5 and 8.5 again will be 17. So I'm going to put my ruler on 17 on that end, 17 on this end. Get it perfectly straight and perfectly lined up. So there we have all 8 squares, and we're going to take this little section And we need one more square. We need 9 squares of the dot. Okay, that had a fold in it, so I needed to press it so it would, my cut would be precise. Okay, so this side is exactly 8.5. This side is a little bit over. So we're going to come in and put the measurer on 8.5, 8.5. And now we have our 9 squares of the dot. Okay, so I hope that all made sense now. I'm not going to do this on the camera, I'm just going to save time, and I'll do the yellow the same exact way and cut 8.5 squares, and then I'll meet you back and we're going to lay our squares out. I will come back on camera and tell you the reason I have so much of this fabric is because I got the 1.5 yards of this color for the squares and for the backing, and then the 21 inches I need to make the baby pillow. So the body of my baby pillow is going to be the solid yellow. Now we're through cutting out all our squares, so we're going to lay the squares out according to the pattern on the diagram. So I'm going to start with the 8 flower squares, and I'm going to go right by this diagram. So I have a flower, then a dot, then a solid. Then a flower, then a dot. Okay, now the next row is going to start with the dot, the solid, the flower, the dot, and the solid. Okay. Then the next row is going to be the solid, the flower, the dot, solid, and flower. Then the next row will start with the flower, the dot. So it's going to go in the same order all the way across. The solid, the flower, the dot. The solid, the flower, the dot. And that's going to work out our pattern and diagram. Okay, so that's 4 rows. We have 1 more row to put down. So the next row will start with the dot. With the solid, with the flower, with the dot. Now let me go to the table and get my one other. I need one more yellow square. Okay, there, it's all laid out. So now I'm ready to go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to start sewing my squares together 1/4 inch seam. So this is the way I take it to the machine. I take the very last square, put the next square on top of that one, the next one on top of that one, then the next one, then the very last square I put face down, and I know those top two are stitched together. So now I'm ready to get started, and I'm going to sew the squares together. Since I have a white background, I'm going to use my white thread to sew it together, and then I'm going to use the yellow thread for the top stitching and the quilting. So to start, be sure and measure from where your needle is to where, mark on your machine where 1/4 of an inch seam will be, because this is very, very important that we have our seams precise. So I'm going to line my two edges up perfectly straight, put it under my machine, and take a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to set my stitch length on 3. I have a Janome New Home machine, and this is my walking foot, and I use that when I'm quilting. And when I got it, I bought this from Continental Sewing in Jackson, Mississippi, and they said it was fine to leave that on when I'm doing regular sewing, not quilting, so therefore I just leave that on. But this is the quilting foot, the walking foot, and it helps the fabric to go through together and not shift as it goes under the presser foot. And the other thing that I have found out is that if you do a lot of sewing, you really need to change your needles on a new project. Okay, there is our first square to put together. So now I have my diagram, my sheet, right here by my sewing machine, so I can be sure and follow it. And be sure I don't get my squares out of order, because I hate taking out and redoing. I'd rather make a whole new garment than take out and redo. Okay, I have all my squares put together. This is the last one in this row. So we're going to line the edges up, get them as even as you can, go under your presser foot, and a 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you don't have a marker on your machine, it's good to take your little measure and measure out from the needle, and then put some masking tape or some kind of line, just so you can, it makes it much easier to keep your fabric straight and get a good even seam line. Okay, now we're going to go to the ironing board and iron our squares. We're going to press all of our seams down. And when you're pressing your seams on your strips, it's too hard to press them open, because these little seams are so narrow. So just take your iron and press all of them in the same direction. Now what I do is press them all down, then lay this first strip on my bed. Then after I get my second row of squares together, I look, and I'll show you when we get ready to sew, press the next row. But one row, you want the seams going in this direction. The next row, you want the seams pressed in the opposite direction. And that way, when you get ready to put your squares together, it will match where you have, your seams will match. This is the way we will do our whole project. So this week we're going to put our squares together and put our top together. And then next week we'll put our 3 layers together and get ready to start the actual quilting of the fabric, attaching the backing, the batting, and the top. So this really is a simple, quick little project. And it makes it easy because it's not a big quilt. The finished size is going to be 40 inches by 40 inches. So it will be 5 rows of squares across in both directions. This can not only just be used as a baby quilt, but it can also just be used like a travel quilt or a lap quilt if you're in a chair or a wheelchair or somebody else is, or if you're traveling and you just need a quilt to go over your legs in the car. So I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to go get the second row, and we're going to sew the second row of squares together exactly the way we did this row, and then I'll show you how to put the 2 rows together. Okay, I have the second row put together. So now I'm going to the iron and press the seams open. So this was the first row, first strip. So I'm going to check and see which direction the seams are going. So on this one, the seams were going this way. So on this row, we want the seams to go the opposite direction. So when I go to the ironing board, since these seams are all pressed in this direction, I'm going to take the strip, lay it down on the ironing board, and press all of these seams in the opposite direction. Okay, my seams are all pressed down, but I'm noticing that this square is a little bit longer. It's not even. So I'm going to go back to my cutting mat, and I'm going to square up this edge because we're getting ready to join this row of squares to this row. All right, I went to the cutting mat and squared up that one little square that had gotten off a little bit. So now I'm going to sew. This is the first row, this is the second row. So now I'm going to lay the second row on top of the first row, and we're going to stitch these 2 rows together. So on the seams, I'm going to match the seams up exactly seam to seam. So you have the first seam going in this direction and the second seam going in that direction, opposite direction. So match those up, feel with your fingers, and make sure your stitching line is exactly straight. And go ahead and pin those 2 seams together. And then we're going to do that on the next seam. Line the seams up where the seams are. This way they just fit together, they lay flat. And when you turn it over and get ready to quilt it, your seams are going to, hopefully, hopefully they're going to all just line up and be a perfect match. Now when I went to Hobby Lobby today, this is the week they have their fabric on sale. So all of their fabric was 40% off. So that really helps my budget. That makes this more of a frugal hobby and a frugal project because I like to be able to get either my yarn or my fabric when they have it on sale. And I'll pass this along. I got an email today from Michaels, and they said they're going to start carrying fabric since Joann's is closing and our availability of fabric is decreasing. So I don't know whether they're going to carry it in the store or whether that's just online, but I'm going to have to check that out, and I'm very, very glad to hear that because I really would like to have another source to get fabric. Okay, this is the last square. So all my seams are lined up. I'm going to put one more pin here at the end so I can keep my fabric together and going straight, and be sure the ends at the very end that those corners match up perfectly so that we'll have a good straight line there. So now we're going back to the machine and get the first two corners perfectly matched up and even. So I'm going to sew that down with a 1/4 inch seam, and we'll have our first 2 rows assembled. Okay, I went over the first seam. Everything is matching up beautifully. If you get to a point where your fabric is a little bit more on one side than the other, just try to ease that fabric in. Sometimes it helps to hold it on both ends and hold both of the edges together until you get that extra a little bit worked in, because no matter how careful we are and how hard we try, it is very, very hard to get everything exact. So, you know, we are not machines or robots, so we do the best we can to get everything straight the way it should be. So I've got both of my edges together. And I did see at Hobby Lobby they have these little snipper scissors available, and the rotary cutters, and the cutting mat. So any of your fabric and sewing supply stores should have all of those. Very necessary items for our craft. Okay, we have got the first row all stitched together. So I'm going back to the ironing board now and press that down. And it doesn't really matter which direction that seam goes because this is going to be on the outside, the border edge. So you can iron that in any direction you want to. But now our quilt is starting to take some form, and this seam went together really well. It matched perfectly. This one I didn't do quite so good at. This one did perfect, and this one did perfect. So only one of them didn't completely line up. Now, if I want to, if it's really important, I can go in and take that loose and redo that seam. So I'm going to think about that. If I take it out, that will make this square more puffy. So I'm going to think about whether I want to take it out or not. But this is the way you do the whole quilt. So I'm not going to stay on doing every single square, but go ahead and if you need to, rewind and do every single row. Pick up your row from where you have it laid out on your bed or a table. Bring it to your machine, sew it all together with a 1/4 inch square. Now this row, the seams are pressed going this direction. So on your next row, bring it over to your squares, your row here, and the next row you'll need to press the seams going in the opposite direction. And that's the main thing to watch on the next rows, that and being sure that you don't get your squares out of order. So see, the pattern is starting to take form. So we have the dot, and the solids. So we're beginning to see the pattern on our quilt top. So isn't that exciting? This is going to be so fun to see it when we get it all finished and then when we do the quilting. So have fun, and I will check back with you in a little bit. And tonight I'm making Southern Cornbread 101. That's what I'm going to have for supper tonight. I'm going to have a cornbread and a cup of buttermilk. That sounds so good tonight. For lunch, I had a really nice lunch. I had my tuna salad and a pita pocket, and on that I put some spinach leaves in it. So I still have some spinach in the refrigerator. I had a fresh apple sliced with peanut butter. So tonight I'm going to eat light and just have cornbread and buttermilk. So this is so easy and so simple. So I have self-rising cornmeal. I'm going to put 1/3 cup cornmeal, 1/3 cup self-rising flour, buttermilk. So I'm going to stir the buttermilk up. And I can't really tell you how much. Usually it's about as much as the cornmeal and flour. So about maybe 2/3 cup. So I'm going to add a little bit more. I have my iron skillet with oil in the oven, and it's heating while I mix up my bread. So the oil in the iron skillet has to be really hot and sizzling, so when you pour the cornbread in the iron skillet, you hear a good sizzle. And what that does, it helps it to start cooking right away, helps it to start rising. So I've got 1 egg. Going to add 1 egg. But when you put your, oh my goodness, this egg is beautiful. You know, when your eggs are a dark orange, they're very nutritious and very good. And these are, it said on the package that they were a free-range, farm-raised egg. So look how beautiful and orange that egg is. If you get eggs that are real light yellow, those are usually the ones that are in the chicken houses, and they don't get out and get a chance to free range. I once had a farm and I raised chickens, and I learned that chickens love to free range, and they would go out and just all over the yard and on the pasture where my horses were, and they would get spiders, worms, ticks, fleas, earwigs, whatever was out there that they could eat. So okay, I added some more buttermilk, and my mix looks like that. That's about the way in fact, I'll add a little bit more buttermilk. So this is not real precise. You just, from making it over and over again, you know how your batter is supposed to look. So that looks good. That looks really good. Okay, now my pan is in the oven. My oven is already heated up to 405 degrees. So I know my oil in my pan is hot. I'm going to get it out and pour it in my bowl. Okay, this is the hot oil. Hear that sizzle? I hope you could hear it. So it started heating up the batter, and as it heats up, it's going to start rising. I'm going to just stir the batter and get the oil mixed up in there. And this is my hot skillet. Hopefully this is gonna sizzle. Yeah, did you hear that? So when your batter sizzles, when you pour it in, you know your pan is good and hot. Sometimes I let my pan just sit in there for maybe 5 minutes and let it get really good and hot. And that starts the cornbread to cooking as soon as it gets in the pan. So there we go. It's in the pan. It's going to start cooking, and I'll show you when it comes out of the oven. Oh, this is going to be so good. You know, sometimes for supper, there's just nothing better than either a bowl of cereal and cold milk or good southern cornbread with a good cold cup of buttermilk. So I'll show you the finished product in just a little bit. Oh, it has to cook 405 to 410 for, we'll see how long this cooks, because I just check on it, and when it's light brown on the top, then I know it's done. Usually about 15, 20 minutes, so I'll let you know. My cornbread is done, and I'm getting ready to get it out of the oven. Wow, isn't that beautiful? That is exactly the way it's supposed to look. So it has baked exactly 30 minutes. I'm going to turn it out on a paper towel. Comes out perfect every time. You have to have a good iron skillet that's well seasoned. So now I'm going to let it cool for just a little bit, not a whole lot, because I like my cornbread warm and crispy when I put it in my buttermilk. That's my supper tonight. Okay, so again, this is the main part of my quilt, and this is the last strip. So I'm going to match the seams up and put the seams where the seams are right snug up, and they fit really well with the seams, one going one direction, one going the other direction. They just nest right into each other, and you can feel with your fingers when you're getting them even together. So I'm going to pin my corner on the starting corner, getting all my edges together. And come down now to the next seam. And I want the seam to come just snug up next to each other. And then I have this seam pressed in that direction and that seam pressed in that direction. So another thing on sewing your seams together, when this one on the bottom is going that way, I have to be careful and watch as it's going over the feed dogs onto the presser foot and make sure that seam doesn't get pushed back in the wrong direction. I've had a couple of them do that, and I have to go back and snip the seam and then get it back down flat, because we don't want a bump where that seam is supposed to be. Okay, and this is the last square to pin. So now I'm going to get the corners together. And my hands get really dry when I'm working with fabric and sewing a lot, making the quilts. So that's why I've had to get a quilting glove. It has little grippers on the bottom that helps me to grip the fabric a little bit better. I've tried putting lotion on my hands and Vaseline, but it wears off, and then my hands get really dry again, and I can't grip the fabric. So if you don't have a quilting glove. These are called quilting gloves. And I heard somebody, I don't remember who it was, but somebody giving tips on YouTube, and they said they had just gotten the gardening gloves from Dollar Tree, because the gardening gloves have that little rubber gripper on the bottom side. And that's a good idea too if you can't find regular quilting gloves. So now I'm going to sew the last strip on, and the top to our quilt will be done. So on quilting, putting my top together, I have a lot of fabric to work with now, so I just have to stop and readjust, reposition my fabric. And I have my Janome machine on top of my sewing machine case. Underneath in this case is my antique, I call it antique, but my Singer sewing machine that I got back in 1967 when I first got married. So I have my Janome on top of my sewing case, and then I have another table to the end. And this table at the end of my sewing machine cabinet is very, very handy when I start actually doing the quilting on the quilt. Okay, so I'm going to watch my seam. Be sure it's flat as it goes under. And sometimes I like to back stitch over that little seam just to reinforce and make sure the corners of my seams don't come unstitched from use and wear. So I don't think it will, it's just a little extra insurance policy. So I'm going to make sure that seam stays flat under there. And take my pin out. I don't sew over my pins. I've had too many needles break hitting a pin. And it's no fun to have to stop and replace a sewing machine needle. And especially if that's the last sewing machine needle you have and you have to go run to the store and get more sewing machine needles. So there you go. In many, many years of sewing, you have just about anything happen that can happen. So I'm just using my measurer to help smooth that seam out underneath, and that works really well. Okay, the last square. And the quilt top will be put together. And as I said earlier on, one of my squares didn't quite line up. I've had that happen one other time where one square would be longer than the other and I would have a little bit left extra. So I took my squares, my quilt top, to my cutting mat and lined up my straight ruler and squared my fabric back up. With as narrow a seam as we're taking, with a 1/4 inch seam on it, we don't have a lot of room to play with, so I do like for my squares to line up. Okay, now that is the last part. All we have to do is press it, and I'm going to press this seam up in the same direction the others were, and I'll meet you back. Okay, this is the quilted, the finished quilt top. So I have it spread out on the bed, and I'm going to leave it right there. It's all finished. And now next week what we will do is get the backing, put the backing, the batting, and the quilt top together, and then we'll be ready to start quilting. So I hope you like this pattern. This is about as simple and easy as you can get on a beginner practice quilt. This was the quilt I had made before, and this is a square, this is a strip, this is a strip. So all of these strips had to be put on the square before the big squares can be put together. So this one involves a lot more. This is one of the easy peasy quilt patterns, and it involves a lot more putting the strips and the blocks together. So if you want something easy and quick and simple, this is about as simple as we can go. So these have the squares, which makes a quilt. And you can make your own design. You can work out your design by which fabric you choose. If you choose a fabric with a print, I saw several that were really, really cute little animal prints. So if you choose a print, when you're putting your squares together, just be sure all your prints are going in the right direction, where when you look at it, all the little animals or trees or whatever the pattern is going the right direction. So that's the one we just finished. This is my practice quilt that I made, working out the design and all the measurements and dimensions. So after the yellow one gets quilted, it's going to have the quilted look and the pillowcase. So this is a fun, quick, easy project, and I hope you're enjoying it. So it's the end of the day. We've got the sewing finished. The quilt top is ready to rest a little bit, and I'm ready to rest a little bit. So Maisie and I are going for our walk. It's our late afternoon walk, and the days are getting longer, so it's lighter today. Hi, Maisie. Maisie! Maisie! You ready to go walk? She said yeah, she's ready to go walk. So now we're back from the walk, and I'm going to just sit in my beautiful Labona rocker that I just absolutely love. Late in the afternoon, just sitting out on the front porch. Birds aren't singing too much right now, but they have been. I have little baby bluebirds in my bluebird house, and I know there are lots of baby mockingbirds and cardinals around because the trees are just full of the birds. So I hope you've gotten your Labona rocker for your front porch or your patio. And it's just so relaxing to sit out and enjoy the evening. So thank you so much for joining me today, and thank every one of you for your time, spending some of your time with me, and for liking my channel and subscribing. It means so much to let me know that you're enjoying what I'm putting out for all of us to enjoy in our retirement. It's a journey, and we're going to do the best we can to enjoy every minute of it. So share and smile, be kind, and I'll see you next week.